On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors,
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, May the 8th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website. That's no good, at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Baby, it's the place to be. It's going to be the place to be this Sunday during the draft lottery, among other wonderful times like during the playoffs or when you don't want to do work and you want to procrastinate. It's a great place to come hang out with sickos just like you who love the podcast. It is free to join. Link in the description. Would love to see you join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord community. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciate it when you support the show, however you support the show. You can also do so by going over to YouTube, subscribing to the YouTube channel for Locked On Raptors. Hit the notification bell while you're there, and you will get a push notification every single time the show is about to premiere or go live. You can join the live chat, talk about the show, talk about how wrong my takes are. It's a lovely thing. Come hang out. Would love to see you in the live chat over on the YouTube channel as well. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And we will get started here on our episode. For the uninitiated, throughout the season, after games, we do a little segment called The Good, The Bad, and The A thing we liked, a thing we didn't like, and a thing that's got us a wee bit intrigued from the latest Toronto Raptors basketball game. To end the season, we have been rolling through the good, the bad, and the sort of big picture takeaways from the season. Did the first two a couple weeks back with Katie Heindel. We did the good and the bad. Katie is on a writer's retreat in the wilderness, and so she's not here for today's episode as we dive into the things about the Raptors season that are interesting, intriguing, but I'm not quite sure how to feel about just yet. We're going to talk on today's show about the month of February where the Raptors looked like a real basketball team for a fleeting few weeks. How real is that? How much do you put stock into that? Is Darko Rajakovic good at coaching? A very important question we didn't get a ton of answers to this year. We got some very promising signs and some kind of curious things otherwise. We'll talk about Darko, but let's kick off with the thing that I am just like, I'm having a hard time because sometimes you see like a case of statistical whiplash in the NBA and it just leaves you kind of dumbfounded. And the number one for me going into the offseason, into the next season for the Toronto Raptors is just how real was RJ Barrett's play as a Toronto Raptor after the trade. RJ Barrett was unbelievable with the Toronto Raptors. And again, we'll get into the stats and the sort of absolute sea change from his time with the Knicks to his time with the Raptors, but 22 points a game, 6.4 boards, 4.1 assists, throwing dimes like he really never has before. And of course, the shooting splits, absurd, 60% on twos, by far the best stretch from 2-point range in his entire career. 60% effective field goal percentage, ridiculous. 3-point percentage, 39.2% on nearly 4 attempts a game. Really impressive stuff. When you kind of dig into the shot chart for him, it's even more baffling. At the rim, we got to take a second to talk about RJ Barrett's rim numbers because ridiculous after he joined the Raptors. You know, prior to coming to Toronto, had never been someone who scored well at the rim. He, finished at the rim, got to the rim plenty, was someone who was always kind of in the upper 20% of the NBA at just like getting to the rim. But even then he took another step with the Raptors far beyond his career bests with the Knicks in terms of just his frequency of getting to the rim. He got to the rim. 52% of his attempts came at the rim. That's crazy. That's in the top 5% of NBA players per clean the glass. That is just extreme extreme rim pressure that RJ Barrett was able to provide. And again, he gets there a lot. Finishing, not always been the thing for him, but that totally changed when he became a Raptor. 72% at the rim as a finisher, 84th percentile in the NBA. So in the top fifth of NBA players finishing at the rim. This is after his entire career. He's flirted around 19th percentile, 24th percentile, 15th percentile at his career low. Never has he shot better than 59% at the rim as an NBA player. He shot 72% over 38 games with the Raptors. Ridiculous. This statistical, just like the yin and yang of his numbers, it leaves you kind of baffled because you think, okay, well, it can't be that good, right? Like what RJ Barrett did after coming to Toronto was incredible, but there's no way that's sustainable over the long haul, right? Like it just seems really hard to reckon with. But you kind of dig into the way he played, the way his game totally changed with the Raptors, the types of shots he's taking and not taking, notably. I actually kind of think if I'm betting as to like how sustainable the RJ Barrett 22, 6 and 4 on ridiculous efficiency stretch with the Raptors was, I think I lean maybe more towards it actually being sustainable than not. And again, you can kind of dig further into his shot chart and the things that he was doing with the Raptors. And it makes a little more sense that like, okay, maybe this is just the player he is now. You know, you can't fake what RJ Barrett did over half a season. You just can't. Like, you know, you get hot, there's small sample, you know, weirdness and things like that. But when it's accompanied by like a complete change in the way you play basketball, I think you have to put stock into it. It's like in baseball, if you're a baseball fan and you kind of watch a guy who has made like a mechanical change in his swing, and all of a sudden he's hitting 30 bombs a season after not having power before, you have to chalk it up to, well, he changed something and he's executing it and it's working very well. I kind of think RJ Barrett is the baseball player who figured out how to hit 35 bombs, you know, kind of deeper into his career after making a mechanical change to his swing. The Raptors, to their credit, when he came to Toronto, it just became, all right, we're going to trim the fat out of your game entirely. We are, you know, sort of focusing in what you do. And the things they had RJ Barrett do were fly around screens like a maniac, barreling towards the rim with a head of steam, catching it right around the nail. And he was unstoppable in those situations, just like an absolute menace getting to the rim. And a big part of that is the screening ability of a Jakob Poeltl, the gravity of an Emmanuel Quickly, and the sort of changing dimensions of the floor after the trades for the Raptors. You know, and again, credit to him. He just like started finishing more effectively. I think, you know, much has been made of the sort of difference in teammates that he is playing with and the sort of overlap with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. It just feels like the looks RJ Barrett wants to get are kind of unencumbered now. He's not fighting for the same space on the floor with two other more high usage guys. That's changed things tangibly. There's less clutter around the rim when he gets in there, because even though Jakob Poeltl's not really a traditional rim protecting type, he's still going pretty far away from the rim to set these, you know, screens to kind of send RJ Barrett on the slingshot going downhill. You know, you're not having him kind of clog up in the dunker spot or anything like that. That Knicks team was just like a very, you know, we're seeing it in the playoffs. They're excellent. Jalen Brunson's ridiculous, but the Knicks have never been like a pretty kind of offense. They've never been an offense that really optimizes the shot chart all that well. And there's a lot of kind of weird fat, right? And that was always a big sort of core tenet of RJ Barrett's game. A lot of stuff that he just didn't do super well that he was being asked to do, and doing so in kind of cramped confines with a tricky roster and team build around him. The Raptors now make a ton of sense for RJ, and it's just like a play finisher who can make some, you know, a quick, you know, easy read on the run. He was throwing skip passes and things like that, and live dribble lefty passes to the corner and the weak side. Really incredible stuff. We'll see about the playmaking. That's probably the thing I buy the least as far as like what's going to actually stick here. But again, diving back into the shot chart and the way what he did feel sustainable, going into 3-point mode too. Like, let's talk about threes. We talked about getting to the rim. It's ridiculous. But from three, shot 39% as a Raptor. He was floating above 40% for much of his time with Toronto until a bit of a swoon late in the season. And you'd think, okay, like 40%, that can't be sustainable either, right? This is a guy who's always struggled with his 3-point shot. he shot well from deep before, right? You think of that 2021, his second season, whatever year that was. I think it was the bubble season was his second year. He was pretty effective that season. He shot 40% from deep on 4.3 attempts a game. And the important thing about that is that is the season for him prior to his time with the Raptors, where he had the lowest pull-up three-point volume that he's ever had. He's always been a very bad pull-up three-point shooter. As far as the catch-and-shoot stuff, though, there's actually been pretty decent success. It's oscillated. He's been as low as 33% on catch and shoots, as high as 41% on catch and shoots. It's kind of gone back and forth this year with the Raptors, 40% on catch and shoots. And the really notable thing with the Raptors, 0.1 pull-up attempts per game from deep. That is like 1 every 10 games. He was just not pulling up from three. He wasn't taking those kind of ill-advised pull-up triples from a guy who just can't hit those shots historically. It's just not part of what the Raptors are asking him to do. The odd bailout here and there, sure, but for the most part, all of his threes are coming basically wide open in the flow of the offense, on the catch, stationary. He's not being asked to be like a difficult movement shooter or anything like that. It's a pretty basic set of threes he's being asked to take, and he nailed them. And I think that can hold up if the pull-ups stay away, right? Like he averaged 1.3 pull-ups a game one season back in 21-22 with the Knicks. That was not a good season for him. Even before coming to the Raptors this season, he was up around half a pull-up attempt per game. So way beyond the 1 every 10 games clip he was at with the Raptors. He's just trimmed out the fat. And if he can just take those basic stand still, catch and shoot triples as part of the flow of the Raptors offense, and you also couple that with the way he can drive, if he ever starts to draw, intense closeouts from defenders, game over, because he's going to barrel to the rim. And as we've seen, he's probably going to score. And so, yeah, there's not really too much pull up to his game. Even pull up twos are a thing of the past. He's not pulling up from 18 feet. He's just getting to the rim whenever he wants. It's an incredible thing. It's like no longer eating Taco Bell once a week for lunch. And you just like, wow, there's no more like Crunchwrap Supreme and spicy ranch flowing through my veins. I actually feel better as a human being. I kind of think that's what we've seen with RJ Barrett's game. You couple on top of all of that, the sort of weird, magical, I'm playing back at home pixie dust that you can't really quantify the effect of, but I think it clearly has had some kind of effect for RJ. And yeah, I think, for me, yes, it's still we got to see how it all plays out. We got to see how he fits into whatever the team looks like next season and how sustainable this all is. Can this carry over a full year? But I think a lot of the indicators suggest that this is, yes, a question, but it might be a question with a pretty rosy answer for the Raptors and for RJ Barrett, which is very exciting stuff. Toxic asset, remember? Like throw into the trade, guy for salary matching, walking trade exception, whatever you wanted to call him. I certainly wasn't. I thought it was a nice, flyer on a guy with some talent at 23 years old. But that was the discourse around the trade. And clearly that has not proven true whatsoever. RJ Barrett's a real piece. And if he plays like he did this season with the Raptors going forward, like he's a real piece with a capital R, capital P. Like he's an absolute core piece of this team long term. And that is very exciting. The defense, we'll talk about the defense another time. That is, there's no question about that. That's not it's really bad. And that has to improve big time. I'm not going to put too much onus on that just yet. Hopefully that's something that he comes into the next season with a little bit more in terms of, lateral quicks and staying in front of his guys and being strong on the spot and things like that. We'll come back on the other side and we are going to talk about the month of February. That beautiful month where the team actually played real basketball for a hot second before it all fell to crap. We will talk about that and whether that's real coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, Mother's Day coming up on Monday. You don't want to forget to send your mom something. Maybe you can't see your mom. Maybe you live far away. Maybe it's impossible to make the travel work this weekend, but you still want to make sure that she knows you're thinking about her. DoorDash can be the way to do that. This Mother's Day, get something thoughtful for your mom on DoorDash. Surprise her from wherever you are with fresh bouquets, the latest tech, gift cards, self-care treats, and more to make her day that much better. Get thoughtful gifts she deserves with the convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts should arrive to her door with DoorDash. That's right. You can just go do that right now. Get your Mother's Day nice little gesture for your mom taken care of on Wednesday. What a wonderful thing you can do with DoorDash to schedule that delivery. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Use or order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates, right? You want to fill those roles with the right people. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and, of course, for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with a B professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. You should be doing that too. Go check them out right now. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back at it here with your episode, putting a bow on our season recap for the most part. If you want to go back last couple of weeks with Katie, we talked about the good and the bad of the season that was. And we wrap up and finish off our grand good, bad, and tradition with a look at the Let's get into number 2 for me, building on the RJ thing. And again, we go to February, a month where, things seemed kind of promising, where the season, it was like the one fleeting moment of the season where it's like, oh, okay, like they have their team. They are not at risk of trading anybody right away. They're playing sensible basketball, and by God, they're winning basketball games. That was a sweet little time. It didn't last very long. And of course, being February, it's a short month, and you also get the All-Star break in there, taking out some of your game time. And so that we really didn't get to see a whole lot of the Raptors in February. I think it was 12 games total. They went 5-7 in the grand scheme. But if you isolate starting like February the 6th, that's the sweet spot. You get a couple of those nasty blowout losses out of there. You isolate for February the 6th onward, the Raptors, dare I say it, were downright respectable. And I think a massive for me going in the summer is just how real was that stretch of season? Just how effective can that team be if they bring back a similar cast of guys over the course of 82 games? In that stretch, February 6th to February 29th, which I believe is the day before Scotty Barnes broke his hand and was out for the season, and like 2 days before Jakob Poeltl got hurt and was out for the season. So February 6th to 29th, 5-4 record, 14th on offense, not bad, 22nd on defense, not great, and probably to be expected that that's the area this collection of players was going to struggle on the most. Not a ton of classic rim protection outside of Jakob Poeltl and help man Scotty Barnes. Kelly Olynyk, not a very good defensive player. A lot of Grady Dick, not a very good defensive player. RJ Barrett, not a very good defensive player. Like it was going to have to be a team that thrived on offense. And 14th is not thriving necessarily, but they were passable. They were effective, and they played pretty interesting connected basketball as well. This was the month that saw like the best sort of little seeds of the potential Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick pairing long term. Their numbers not great when they share the floor together. We'll get to that a little bit more too coming up. But overall, that was easily Grady's best month of the season. 11 a game, 2.5 boards, 1 assist, 55, 49, 85 shooting splits. Really impressive stuff. 49% from deep. You'll have to see that. But they didn't win their minutes. That's rookie stuff. That's going to get better as Grady Dick matures and gets stronger and all that good stuff. But overall, that was one of the bright spots of that month. Obviously, you saw, I think just sort of an understanding of how the Scotty, RJ, Poeltl, Emmanuel Quickly, that's the other guy, how those four are going to kind of coexist with one another. And we saw the Raptors have a starting five that looked downright awesome for a stretch during this time. The starting five of Quickly, Trent, Barrett, Barnes, Poeltl, plus 11.8 net rating in 347 possessions, about 164 minutes of game time. So a pretty tiny sample all told. This was their second most used lineup of the season, though. This whole season is just like a hodgepodge of tiny samples that may or may not mean a damn thing, but that's very much, as bigger samples go, this is one of the biggest ones you can find for a Raptors lineup. and they were really good. Again, 11.8 positive per 100 possessions. Like that's really good stuff. If that's a lineup you can have as a core anchor lineup that's playing 20 plus minutes a night for you, that gives you a pretty real shot of winning some games. And I guess a big question is like how, like the sort of a micro within the overall that is February is how real is that starting five? Like, gotta say, frankly, pretty shocked by how that lineup performed defensively, considering Quickly's like a fine-ish, okay, more rotational than on-ball defender. We know Gary Trent Jr. is the guy who's going to hawk steals and not do much else. RJ Barrett was not very good defensively at all this season. And yet that group, 110.1 defensive rating, 68th percentile among all lineups. Like, and if that defense is real, like you kind of got to bring back Gary Trent Jr., don't you? Like this is like a massive question, I think, for the front office to sort through and try to figure out is like, how legit is that starting five? Can you actually trust it to play passable defense? I think the offense could be very good with that look. Especially if Gary Trent Jr. is hitting his shots as like a fourth or fifth option trigger man. We know what Jakob Poeltl does around the rim. We know what RJ Barrett does around the rim. And obviously there's plenty of Quickly Scotty chemistry to still be forged, as we talked about on Monday's show with Big V. But yeah, like that's like a serious question that I don't... I want to believe it. I feel like it's probably not that good defensively. I feel like plus 11.8 is a little bit pushing it as far as what it's actually going to be. The Raptors' strength of schedule during this time, they played some good teams for sure. They picked up that nice win against the Pacers, a second round playoff team. That matters. They had that incredible game against the Thunder during this stretch. But they also played like the Nets and stuff. Like it's hard to really pull a ton of meaning from this little pocket of the schedule. This is the challenge of this entire season. It very much is just like a big giant because we don't know what's real and what's not, because every sample is so teensy weensy. They had that game against the Rockets during this stretch. That was a very nice win. They won by 3 at home. They also got bludgeoned by the Cavs and the Spurs in a pretty nasty loss. That's all part of this. They had the very close game against Dallas. So like a pretty decent strength of schedule, not amazing. I don't think it really says one thing one way or another. And so, yeah, I think, how this actual starting five works, how this month of February holds up in terms of a long-term, full season remains a huge question for me. And that's like, again, the evaluation that the front office has to do, digging in further than I can as far as like what the metrics are, what the data says, what the proprietary stuff says. It's like a massive thing they got to sort out this summer, because if it is true and this lineup can be a plus 12 per 100 possessions group, you probably got to bring back Gary Trent Jr. That may be the answer is one of the biggest offseason questions they have. Another thing that happened during this month was the bench looked interesting. It was bad. It got run off the floor for long stretches. The Scotty plus bench looks that were in there, Scotty, Grady Dick, Bruce Brown, Ochai Agbaji, and Kelly Olynyk, minus 19.3 per 100 possessions. Got crushed in 131 possessions together. Just not very good. The bones were there. Like the connectivity on offense was absolutely there. The stops were not. 133.1 defensive rating. Woof. And I frankly think that it checks out, right? Kelly Olynyk as your backline rim protector, not going to be awesome. They probably have to figure out a different way to run those second units. It's why you might be interested in the Raptors taking some kind of switchable big in the draft to kind of give those second units a bit more rim protection and defensive insulation. You've got Grady Dick in those lineups. He was a nice team defender. He was also in the 1th percentile of isolation defenders in basketball. Not the on-ball guy you want right now. I think he'll get close to passable. I think he's smart. I think he's long, etc. But it's going to take some time and some growth and some more strength and all of that stuff that we know about Grady Dick at this point. But yeah, like I think maybe there's an upgrade on the Bruce Brown spot to make those looks look a little better. It continued the trend of the entire season of Scotty Barnes plus bench lineups being absolutely miserable. But this one, I feel like everyone who saw this lineup get some run together during the month of February thought, hey, like, there's something here if you squint. And so, again, sorting out just how bad, they would actually be over the course of a full season, evaluating, can that lineup, can those bench looks actually work? Is there an upgrade to be made on Bruce Brown, on Ochai Agbaji, who I think was pretty disappointing as a Raptor, to, sort of fill in those lineups a little bit more effectively? That's a big thing. And I do think because of how bad the numbers were compared to how interesting it looked from eye test, like I think it probably ends up somewhere in the middle. And they're probably a little bit more passable and less of a full-on negative when they're on the floor. And if that's the case and your starting lineup is good, like all of a sudden you look around and it's like, is this team going to win like 42 games or something like that? Like that's on the table if your most important core lineups are winning a lot of minutes by a lot. It's just kind of how the math works. So yeah, February, wild, fascinating month. Really interesting games went on in there. Some very low points, the Cavs and the Spurs in particular. Some very interesting high points, the Pacers game, the Mavs game that they were in very much until the end, if I recall, that Thunder game that went to double OT, like lots of promising signs there. We'll have to see kind of how it all plays into what their decision-making will be this offseason and how much they actually look at the month of February and say, hey, this is when we had our team and we were pretty decent. Do we make too many adjustments? Do we keep the same group? I hope they don't keep the exact same group. They got to add to it. They can't just rest on their laurels and say, hey, we were kind of 500-ish. Let's just roll with that. But I do think there's some pretty intriguing stuff that took place in that month that, could hopefully inform the decisions they make this offseason. We'll come back on the other side. I'll talk about Darko Rajakovic. Is he good at his job? We'll see. I guess that's why it's we're not quite sure. But we'll get into some of the inklings we might have coming up in just one sec to close out the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. I've told you I love Monopoly Go. It's my absolute favorite board game of all time. I love playing Monopoly with friends, family, whenever they will actually play with me, which is not very often. But now I got Monopoly Go to scratch that itch, baby, and it's a wonderful thing. You're not just playing against people as well in Monopoly Go. It's a friendly environment where you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when in fact you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Yes, there's some friendship in here, but also ruining your friends' lives as well. It's a beautiful thing. Go to Monopoly Go right now. It feels new. It's exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games as well, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, rounding out the show here as we continue to take a look at the from the season that was for your Toronto Raptors. Big questions that we yet had to have like full-on answers to that it sure would be nice if we could get some answers to either early next season or in the summertime, etc. Last one I have here, actually, before I dive into Darko, just a heads up, Locked On Sports Today 24/7 is your all-day streaming channel. You got to go check it out. If you don't want to do work all day and you just want to watch podcasts, it's a great thing to do. It's 24/7. There are shows covering all the biggest stories in sports, NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs, the whole 9 yards. Go check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7 for your all-day sports hit, baby. All right, let's get to it. Is Darko Rajakovic good? This is the final I have for the season. It's kind of impossible to say. It's mostly impossible to judge any coach before they get the job. Obviously, you got to see what they do in the job to have any sort of inkling, especially first-timers, which Darko Rajakovic, of course, is after many, many years of high-level assistanting elsewhere. I think there was a lot of really encouraging stuff from Darko Rajakovic, and I think there was a lot of stuff that was either left to be desired or that it's just kind of like an incomplete grade, frankly, because the team was not really set up for a head coach to implement a system in a really sort of complete way when they went through like 3 or 4 different iterations of the team over the course of the season. The most continuity they had at any point this year, I guess outside of the start of the year when Dennis Schroeder was there, was like the last 20 games when the only continuity was, all the bad players are playing. All right, cool. Let's try to make something happen. They didn't make anything happen, of course. And so, yeah, it was a really tough hand Darko Rajakovic was dealt. And I think that's made it so it's a whole lot harder to decipher, is he a good coach or not based on his first season. Let's start with the stuff that I think is tangibly, like, you can point to and say, that was really good. It's the relationship stuff. Darko Rajakovic just seems like a really good dude and someone who people like and want to play for and want to sort of be around. Everything you hear, the testimonials from every player on the roster after the season, in the middle of the season, just like, wow, Darko is like a nice guy. He loves to talk to us about life and stuff. Like the personal relationships were a thing that obviously decayed in the last couple of seasons with Nick Nurse in Toronto. And hey, not everyone's going to handle the same things the same ways. Nick Nurse is a brilliant tactical coach. The Raptors needed someone who could be a little bit more of a person-to-person manager, it seemed. And Darko Rajakovic 1000% seems to check that box. He seems to have a very good grasp of the sort of grind of an 82-game season, the sort of ups and downs that are going to come. He's very empowering, it seems. Think of Emmanuel Quickly, for example, coming over, being reticent to shoot when he first joined the Raptors, and Darko just hounding him. Take more, shoot 10, shoot 12 threes a game, go nuts, be you, have fun out there. And Emmanuel Quickly got better as a result. He settled into his role as the lead guard as a result of playing a more Emmanuel Quickly style of game. It was really beautiful to see. I think it's pretty clear that Darko's focus on development is massive and is going to hopefully pay long dividends for the Raptors. But early returns, very exciting. Grady Dick got massively better over the course of the season. It was incredible. The start of season to end of season transformation for Grady Dick, pretty incredible for a guy who barely looked like an NBA player, barely looked like a G League player, frankly, when he was playing for Raptors 905. It was really tough stuff. They turned him into a real guy by the end of the season, who I think a lot of people are very excited about, and they should be. Taking RJ Barrett's game and, like we talked about, chiseling it down into this sort of like analytically friendly threes and at rim shots and ridiculous efficiency style of play, that was huge. And yes, RJ has agency in that too, but clearly the coaching staff saw something and said, hey, play this way and things are going to happen that are good for you and the team. Scotty Barnes took a massive leap. Scotty Barnes felt happier. He felt more like the sort of beginning to learn the ropes of being the leader of the team. I think Darko Rajakovic was just like there to guide and instill that sort of belief that he can in fact be the guy throughout the year. The relationship stuff feels like it's as good as it's been with the Raptors since the Dwayne Casey era, frankly. And that is really encouraging stuff. When it comes to the stuff we don't know, a lot of it's the tactical side of things, right? We just didn't see the Raptors play like any high leverage basketball games this season. They didn't even get fun high leverage tournament games. Like, it was just like one game and all of a sudden they lose. And it's like, wow, we're like basically out of the running. And it all happened in the matter of like a week. It was a nightmare. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked about the bad and just how miserable that tournament experience was for the Raptors. We didn't see any high leverage games like at all. We didn't get to see, Darko pull the cranks and levers of a close game in clutch time, outside of a couple of instances here and there. And it's just like, we'll see, right? It's hard. We can't make the judgment on his in-game tactician sort of skills because we didn't get the opportunity to really see it. And the team he had was either bereft of talent or constantly changing or hanging under enormous clouds of uncertainty. It was just a really tough go for Darko as a rookie coach. And I think the way he handled and kind of kept the room together, going back to the relationship stuff through all of that, is really damn impressive. Offensively, I think it's pretty clear the system has really good bones, right? There's a lot of merit to the way they want to play basketball. It looked so much better than it did last season. Obviously, like the Nick Nurse, everyone is ISOing and trading ISOs, and we're going to go hunt mismatches offense really got more thin by the end, right? It just was not aesthetically pleasing basketball. The Raptors now, they're cutting, they're moving, they're passing, they're like leading the league in assists. That's beautiful stuff. Does it translate to great offensive rating? No, they were a bottom 10 offense, but I think with better players running it and more time to run it together, things get better. We talked about it 14th in February on offense when they had just a brief little window of the team they expect to have in most part for next season. There's something there with the way they play. And I think specifically with Scotty Barnes as the main guy on this team, I don't think Scotty's ever going to be the type of guy who wants to sort of commandeer the offense, be a heliocentric offensive player. The dude's wired to pass. The dude's wired to create for others as much as he can score on his own. And you'll have to have that aggression, of course. But I think the way they're playing is just so conducive to maximizing Scotty Barnes because the passing is the whole thing with Scotty Barnes. That is the beautiful thing of his game that kind of takes him from interesting player to potential full-on star. And to utilize that in a system where passing and making the next decision is everything, I think that's fantastic. I think that's a really good understanding of the personnel you have, which again, sort of score one for Darko there. The biggest question I have is on defense. Like, I still don't really have an idea of what their defensive philosophy this season was. I asked Darko about this on media day, and he said, protect the rim, limit corner threes. And like, they didn't really do that. Their entire shot chart is just kind of mid. They didn't funnel the team they were playing to any given spot on the floor. They weren't like, all right, we're going to, compromise corner threes to chase above the break. We're going to compromise this part of our game to protect the rim. No, it was just kind of like teams got to where they wanted to go and took shots, and there was not really any rhyme or reason to how the Raptors played defense. And again, that's a chemistry thing, right? That's a not having the personnel thing. They missed their two best defensive players for the last 20 games of the year. You're not going to play good defense when that's the case. Before that, Jakob Poeltl goes out in January. The defense fell apart because Jakob Poeltl is one of the best defensive players on this team, and their only real shot at tangible rim protection. And so not having him was a huge hit to getting an idea of what Darko's defense is actually supposed to look like. I think the sort of idea is Jakob Poeltl as like a something of a versatile big. I think they mostly want him in like a medium drop or a deep drop, and they want Scotty Barnes kind of lurking the back line there. Beyond that, though, it's hard to kind of figure out what the identity is because no one's all that good at defense, right? There's a lot of blow-bys, a lot of guys getting hung up on screens, getting beat at the point of attack, not being able to stick on the hip of their guy, leaving Jakob Poeltl in no man's land. Dennis Schroeder. Like that was the story of the first 2 months of the season, was the defense was nowhere near what it should have been on pure talent because the perimeter defense was not there. OG had quiet quit. Schroeder was playing miserable point of attack defense. It just wasn't working. After that, after the trades, it just all fell into disrepair. From the Yak injury 4 games into the post-OG era, to the Siakam trade, to the injuries to Scotty and Jakob Poeltl. Again, an entire season of hodgepodge small samples that we really can't draw any conclusions from. And so I'm willing to like hold off on conclusions on the defense for sure with Darko Rajakovic. I think we got to see more. We got to see what happens if they add more defensive talent, which God, please, let's hope they do this summer. And I think, ultimately Darko's like a basketball head, man. The dude has, I think, a really sort of interesting philosophy. I think he has a philosophy that he knows he wants to follow. We know it more on offense than defense right now. But I do think, given the proper personnel and some time to actually build some stuff in and run it more than 10 games at a time with various iterations of the roster, there's a really interesting coach here in Darko Rajakovic. Like, I think the personal relationship stuff, like he's like on the special tier of that, I think already. Like that dude, that's someone that people are going to want to play for, it seems. The tactics we'll have to see. It's why he remains but I am encouraged because of the stuff that Darko did to kind of hold the team together this season and facilitate development. There's some pretty interesting stuff going on with Darko. So is Darko good? I'm leaning towards yeah, but we'll have to see when it comes to the sort of offensive and defensive principles played over the course of a full season, hopefully with full health. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Always appreciate you, tuning in, subscribing, rating, reviewing, telling a friend. It's the best. You're the best. We'll be back again tomorrow. TBD on the topic for tomorrow. Might get back into the mailbag. Might, go with some other draft stuff or something like that. Talk about some straggler prospects we haven't talked yet who could be in the top 6. Friday, we have the grand debate of keep or convey with S. Barrett Henny. That's going to be a ton of fun. So you have that to look forward to. But until then, thank you so much. Thanks for rocking with the show. Subscribe, follow, rate, review. Join the Discord. Link in the description. Please do it. It's free to do. And we'll talk to you again on Thursday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.